I tell everyone that walks in the door, like that I care about two things, attitude and effort. You give those things, there's a chance for me to move you up and elevate you. And if you get to a place here where you don't think there's a growth potential and you don't think there's more opportunity for you to spread your wings and fly, then I'm going to try to find you a place outside of here that gives you that opportunity.
Welcome to Leadership on the Links, the podcast that showcases innovators in golf course management and the issues they face. I'm your host, Tyler Bloom. In Leadership on the Links, you hear the stories of people shaping the industry from their first swing to their dream match. You feel like you're on the course playing with your most inspiring colleagues, having great conversations, digging into insights and sharing a few laughs. Our industry is changing. As a leader, you need to keep up on everything from trends to technology to best practices. Together, we'll continue to build world-class clubs and teams. Let's get to it. Enjoy.
Well, I'm super excited to be joined today by friend Connor Healy out at Conway Farms in the Chicago suburbs. Connor, I don't even know how we actually initially connected. I don't know if it was you just reached out to me, you're inquiring about a company. I don't know if you remember that at all.
Yeah, so I actually came to you through Scott Pavelko, who at the time was at Bobolink.
Yeah.
And I like the way he approached kind of a lot about the job. And so we had a lot of good conversations about just superintendent life. And, at that point, the hiring landscape was, I would say, pretty challenging at best, from the lowest level through assistant level positions. And I just felt like I saw what he was doing. He always seemed to attract good people and always seemed to have a pipeline. And I know that he had a relationship with you. And so, just through kind of picking his brain a little bit, it sort of led me down the path to you.
All right, Scott, if you're listening, you get the referral fee, buddy. You get the commissions. So now it's really cool because that Chicago market, that's kind of really where it started, was with Scott. And then it kind of bled out, whether it's yourself, Curtis, Shore Acres, Aaron. So it's kind of funny how all those things play out. Walk us through a little bit about kind of your career.
Yeah, so I kind of got into golf pretty early. Started as a caddy at 13 at Ravisloe Country Club, south side of Chicago club, kind of by Olympia Fields. Grew up right over there. And, not just a summer job. I had an uncle that was also in the industry, on the sales side, for a chemical company, and saw what he did. I thought basically he played golf. And so I was like, that seems like a fun job. What should I do? Talk to him. And he's like, go work for the superintendent. So I met with Mike Mumper, who's the superintendent at Ravisloe at the time. Huge man. I was a small little kid, very intimidating situation. He likes to tell the story a little differently, that he saved my life, but really, I approached him and said, I'm interested in working on the grounds crew. Is there any opportunities? And so I did caddying and worked the grounds crew through high school. Kind of started to fall in love with it and really just liked working outside. And, developed a close relationship with the assistant Ed Escar at the time, who really kind of helped form what it is to work on a golf course. Had me do everything. I mean, the amount of things I did on a day were incredible for a 15, 16-year-old kid. But then they pushed me. Mike certainly pushed me to go to school for it, and to go to a Big Ten school. I looked at a few in the area, decided to go to University of Illinois with Bruce Branham. And during that time, also kind of formed these relationships just through the greater network of how superintendents work, which I had no clue at the time. But, ended up making some connections that led to internships through Mike and through the University of Illinois. ended up going and working for Ed Fisher at Old Elm, legend in the industry, a guy that means probably more to me than almost anybody. Did a lot of things for me, helped me through some difficult times, and really ended up forming some connections that I would say are why I'm sitting in the seat that I'm in currently. Um, he put me in connection with Brian Sullivan at Bel Air, who I ended up going out to work for. And Brian whipped me into shape as fast as anybody can whip someone into shape. Consider him an incredible mentor. I try to pick his brain whenever I have the opportunity. And then from there, I went on to work at Olympia Fields for Dave Ward and Kevin West. Did the U.S. Open there in 2002. And from there, I wanted to kind of pursue being like a solo assistant, lead assistant somewhere. Again, back to these connections. Ended up, having superintendents that were friends with Chad Ball, who was the superintendent at Conway Farms for 20 years. Was looking for an assistant. And so timing worked for me to leave Olympia Fields and come up here to take the job as the assistant. So I spent 10 years here as the assistant superintendent, and transitioned to the superintendent in 2014 was when the title switch happened. And kind of been in that role since. So, yeah.
I'm going to go a little off track here because I think this is something that we have seen now in a number of job searches around the assistants that are currently at the facility and how do they position themselves to kind of get elevated into that superintendent role. Can you talk about that a little bit and how that transpired for you?
Sure. I mean, I think it's a pretty big, broad conversation. And you don't know it at the time, all the things that you're doing to put yourself in a position to succeed and potentially get the role that you dream of. When I was at school at Illinois, who's, in the Final Four, hopefully they pull through. I had said that my goal was to be the superintendent of a top level club in the Chicago market. I didn't know what that meant. I had some broad terms and I didn't know how I was going to get there, but I just thought, just put your nose down, go to work, try to work for good people at good places, and the rest will play out. Like it may take longer than you think it should. And, when you're in that moment, the patience is a hard thing to kind of have. And sort of within that, I served 10 years as an assistant at this one location, on top of doing a couple of years and working a U.S. Open. I felt like I was ready to go, 5 years into my assistant's tenure at Conway Farms alone. And there wasn't a lot of movement even in the industry at that point. So there weren't a ton of opportunities. So one of the things that I did, at some point, I just put the frustration aside and I said, you know what, I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to get an MBA. I thought it was something new that I didn't see a lot of other people doing. I thought that would translate well to the private club industry in particular. You're talking to a lot of people who are coming from the business world, that are ultra successful. And how could I have conversations with them that were meaningful and that were on their level? And so I went to school at night for 4 years from 2008 to 2012, and completed that while being the only assistant here for a majority of that, going through a renovation. It was hard work. I also had my 2 children, in 2010 and 2011. So like the time management skills that I learned in that period of time, like I don't even know how I lived through it, but much less figured out how to manage the time of all of it. But coming out of it, you realize like one, how much time you waste and how inefficient you are and how busy you think you are until you're actually busy. So I learned that little bit of a skill set that you really need to be a successful superintendent, I would say. It is to some degrees this weird 24-hour a day thing where whether you're at work or not, you're thinking about the weather, you're thinking about people, you're thinking about all these different things. So I learned to a degree how to balance that. Um, I think my wife would say I don't still balance it that well at times, but I'm working on it. And so those are some of the steps that, probably prepared me and got me ready to, be in a position for them to want me to be the superintendent at Conway Farms. That didn't come without like a lot of effort and a lot of proving yourself time and time again. There's a risk to clubs, certainly, of hiring somebody that hasn't sat in the seat before. And there's always an easy answer to go outside of the club, and look for other candidates. Fortunately, in my case, they didn't feel the need to do that, and I'm grateful to the club for that.
I'm sitting here like and processing in my mind, working on a golf course, which is typically, no short of a 10 to 12-hour day, managing kids and then managing education all at the same time. Dude, that's a pretty impressive interview to show somebody your commitment and dedication. So I could see why that maybe they did it. But the one thing though, I think and curious is like it sounds like you had exposure to the membership. So like they got to know you, they got familiar with you, things of that nature. And I know, some of the programming that you've instituted there now is really getting your assistants exposed to members, department heads, budgets, things of that nature. And what I find in a lot of these superintendent searches when they're evaluating the current candidates is they just don't know. Like they don't know the internal candidate. And so that opens the door then for them to explore people beyond, the internal candidate. So what allowed you or what made that difference, that the things that you were doing to get the exposure and to build that trust and sort of support from the club? Because that seems to be the differentiator.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's such a hard thing to like maybe verbalize, like what were the things exactly that happened that made it possible for them to trust me. I think one, Chad Ball put me in a position to succeed. He allowed me to get in front of the membership, allowed me to go to board meetings, and then just kind of brought me along and certainly advocated for me to be his replacement when he retired. So I think that's an important step, is that there's somebody there in the room that's advocating for you. I had also, like, I've always been a big believer in cross departmental relationships. I think it's one of the most difficult things in this industry that I think a lot of people put by the wayside, is their relationship with the golf pro and the general manager, COO. And it's so important to who we are and what we do. And they're member facing, we typically aren't. And so even as an assistant, like I believed in like having good relationships in those areas that can oftentimes be pretty naturally kind of like we butt heads. The interests aren't always aligned between the grounds department and the golf department. And working together with people who, like, one, you enjoy is amazing and it's hard to find. So when you have it, you hold on tight. And we have that here. My director of golf, Jeff Morey, has been here for 30 plus years. COO Todd Marsh, same thing, been here 35 years. And I would say those two people went to bat for me just as much as Chad did. And so again, that comes down to the relationship building part of the equation, that, these are things that I was doing before knowing that this job was even a potential. But putting a focus on working with people and not just staying in our little silo of grounds and only caring about grounds, caring about the big picture. So I think when you start to show that you care about the entire thing, people will naturally gravitate towards wanting to talk to you, have your opinion in the room. And through that, I got like introduced to members and started to get a little bit more comfortable with them. And then there was one like sort of side thing that happened, working at a club that has a scholarship program. I had to interview for the scholarship to, I paid for my way through my master's program, but they help support it like through the scholarship. So I had to sit in the scholarship board interviews with a group of, 5 to 10 people that are members. And that's a unique experience if you haven't done it, and you have to advocate for yourself. So I gained some relationships there that those people were then telling my story of, oh, Connor's going back to school. He's doing this, he's doing that. And then other people would ask me about it. So it was very granular how this thing happened and sort of snowballed, but they were all through these little actions.
Yeah, I was writing down, typing notes as you're explaining that. So there were some circumstances that probably aren't traditional for an assistant to get that kind of exposure, through their time there. Um, and I just want to kind of echo this as superintendents are hearing this, that you got to really try to find ways to integrate your assistants into green committee meetings, department meetings, because you never know when that opportunity comes up, regardless if that's for an internal opportunity at your current club or externally. It is a difference maker. It's a differentiator. And the committees are weighing in on that quite a bit, that they're able to digest who and differentiate who is getting that exposure versus who isn't. And a lot of times, unfortunately, I find great candidates that I know in the field can do the job aren't getting the nudge because of that differentiator of exposure to the member communication side. And they feel, in most clubs right now, I think there's a little bit of a sway because there's so much money going into golf and there's so much money going into these golf courses that they want to have confidence that the person taking over has that level of exposure to stand in front of a membership at an annual meeting, or to be able to drive conversations in a green committee meeting. They don't need to drive the entire conversation, but at least they own a specific element that they're communicating and developing some of those soft skills. So kudos to you for doing that. And then obviously we're in the midst of a recruiting project with you, as one of your individuals just recently landed their own superintendent's gig. So when you think about sort of the operation at Conway Farms, what differentiates you? What are some things that you offer that you think are unique? We talked a little bit about location being, could be a driver in some cases, and in other cases it doesn't matter. It's not location that matters. It comes down to the club and timing.
Yeah. Again, like we're sitting in one of the best markets in the country. The North Shore of Chicago is incredible for golf. There's a very high golf acumen here amongst the private membership. We have a ton of resources, a ton of great name clubs, and a lot of it's a great set of superintendents in the area too. So it's a special thing to be a part of. So any opportunities there are incredible. And so it's interesting to me though, that there's so many dynamics at play of why people come to a job, and it goes beyond just the name of the club. And so I think one of the things that I've really put a focus on is, everything that I'm doing is really around people, and it really is about developing and building those people, whatever their position is. If it's their first job on the golf course and they're just learning how to rake bunkers, great. Make them as good at that as they can be and show them the pathway to elevate and do something else and grow their skill sets. You made reference to my senior assistant, Kyle DeRue. He's with me now. He's transitioning over to a superintendent role in the area in a couple of weeks. And he's pushed me as much as anyone to cross training is so important. And so everyone we bring in the door, we're trying to maximize whatever their current skill sets are, but also develop them to be the best version of what they can bring to the table at Conway Farms, and hopefully even elevate them beyond what they think. So it starts at that lower level of just caring about the people and showing them that there's a pathway to better themselves. And if they see this as a career, hopefully provide one for them, um, through elevating both their position and status here, but maybe it's outside of here. And I tell everyone that walks in the door, like, that I care about two things: attitude and effort. You give those things, there's a chance for me to move you up and elevate you. And if you get to a place here where you don't think there's a growth potential and you don't think there's more opportunity for you to spread your wings and fly, then I'm going to try to find you a place outside of here that gives you that opportunity. And I did that with a recent assistant. I thought that he would have a better opportunity moving on as an assistant here to take a senior assistant position at a very high level, top 100 club, where he could really cut his teeth and work for a different style manager, and just grow as a person, maybe more than he could here. So while that was a short term, it was a loss for me, and losing a talent like that, I thought it was the best thing for that person in that moment. And so that to me is like what speaks to how I try to differentiate, is caring about the people. Like, and each person is different. Each person has different needs and wants and what they want to get out of their life and where they see their career going. And your job is to assess that and see how you can get them where they want to go, and maybe even show them, like, open a few doors that they don't even think is possible. And so I focus on that from every level, like, constantly. And one thing I think about, like, I had a recent interview with somebody in a different search, where the conversation comes up about work-life balance. Like, that's constantly a thing. And I think it's a really popular phrase to throw out there. And I basically said, that if you want to be successful at anything, like, that phrase doesn't exist to some degree. There is no perfect balance. Like, I tell my kids the same thing. Like, if you want to succeed at something, you have to put more work into it. And it may throw your life a little bit out of balance in that area in order to achieve something. And that's fine. But in order to create this perceived balance, I would say, like, the thing that I tell people is, like, I care as much about your professional life as I do that you're happy in your personal life. And so when people come to me and they want to talk about, goals and career and all this stuff, like, I can talk forever. I talk too much. But I say, what are your 1, 2, 3 professional goals, long-term, short-term? But what are your personal goals? What are some ways that you're going to, like, what are things you want to work at? What are things that you take joy in outside of work? And I think that's lost a lot of times. Everyone is so focused on get the job done, elevate this person professionally. But I think if you show some level of care about the person, and what their passions are outside of work, I think that speaks volumes, and it shows that you actually care about them as a person, not just like a person that you need to do a task on a given day. And it's hard. Like, this is a hard job where we work a lot of hours, a lot of strange hours. I try to be respectful of that. But at the same time, be very upfront about what it is to do this job. And I want to help you get there, but I also want you to be a well-rounded person, because I think you'll just find more satisfaction in the job and in your life in general.
Well, you just covered something. I was gave a presentation last week to the Penn State Turf Club, the 4-year students. Unfortunately, the 2-year students are already, well, it's a good thing. They're already out into the job in the workforce. So I brought this up about work-life balance, and I don't know how we got to it. It wasn't like, hey, we've got this segment on work-life balance. It just kind of, I think somebody asked the question what my take on it was, and I probably answered very similar to you. Is like, it's evolved. And I think each season of life, every thing that you do is going to evolve that your perspective of work-life balance. Even for us, there's weeks where it is a grind and it's hard to like focus on anything else because you're pretty much embedded into the work. And then I think, what I've probably changed my messaging around is it really depends on what your goals are. Because if you're going to be a superintendent, I don't know any club that asks in an interview what somebody thinks about work-life balance. I just don't see it.
Yeah, I mean, you have to learn those balances. And I kind of touched on it in some different ways. For me, like I try to give people time off. We have a great PTO policy here. I mean, salaried employees have unlimited PTO as long as their supervisor approves it. So I say use that with common sense. Like maybe you shouldn't take off a month right out of the gate. But at the same time, like if you're getting the job done, I have no problem on the other side saying take a week off in the summer. Like I think that's great. Like if we can work a week off for all of our people in the summer, they come back so refreshed, ready to work, ready to finish off the second half of the season strong. And it's our job to manage like how you use those pieces of the puzzle. And even for myself, like I have to force myself into ways to, more effectively manage all of my life. And I've gotten better at it. This was another thing that came from Scott Pavelko. So sorry if I'm calling him out on this. You can delete this part, but taking Sundays off. And so like I try to take every Sunday off. Doesn't always happen, but I try. If there's events, there's obviously circumstances. But that just means physically being away from the property. Mentally, I'm always engaged. Like I check in on Sundays still. I ask how it's going, who was there, anything to be concerned about, because you have to be thinking about the next day, the next week. And so there isn't really like, even though you're not there mentally, it's hard to break away. And so that's one of the things that I also try to, coach a little bit on to the assistants. Like I try to share, as you can gather by this conversation, like share everything about myself. And I don't do it in a self-serving way, but if I come back from a meeting, like I try to give them, this is what happened in the meeting. This is what we talked about. This is why it's important. And even the impact to me, well, this certain set of conversations made me feel a certain way, frustrated, upset, whatever it is, so that they understand like there's these layers of things that happen constantly at the club or in your job that you don't know about until you get into them. And so like you just don't know what it is like to do the superintendent job until you've actually sat in the seat. But I felt like I got this through some past assistants that they said they hated listening to me talk and tell about all my problems. But then when they got into the position, they're like, I kind of like, I understand now. And I appreciate like you gave me some perspective that is valuable to me now. And so I do preface that with all of my team that, I'm going to over talk it. I'm going to overshare. But I believe in like a ton of feedback. I'm not a like once a year, here's your review. That's the last time you're going to see me. Like it's constant and it's coming every direction. And I actually like, I'm a little bit messed up in the head because of this, but I like openly like look for it back. And sometimes it crosses lines, but like I want the people to tell me like, you need to like chill out a little bit. You need like, why are we doing this? Like I think a healthy amount of questioning is a great thing. I'm not a big like it's my way or out the door type of person. I'm very much like a collaborative person and I put a lot on my assistants. They develop a lot of the programs that we implement every year. And I look at every year as a new year. Like it isn't like cut and paste for me.
Well, where can people find you if they want to connect with you? This is a really great conversation, by the way.
Yeah. I'm obviously in the GCSA directory. So you have all of my email information, cell phone. Like people can call me directly. I don't have a problem with that. It's listed. I don't do a lot on the social media platforms as far as like, personal or professional stuff. I obviously engage in it a bit. They could go through the club, certainly through the club website, through use
Yes,
all the
please apply if you're
resources you can.
listening.
Yeah. Yeah. Use all your resources to reach out. Like I said, I'm pretty open book, and I've had conversations with people that, maybe this place wasn't the right place for them, but I tell everyone, if you have an open conversation and you say this isn't the fit for you, I'm still going to try to help you find that match. Like if you want to use me as a resource, I do it to people and places that I'm not even like actively recruiting for. Like I do first screen stuff. I've taught at schools, through the University of Wisconsin. Like I've done all these things, and it's more about just like, again, trying to help people in as many ways as you can. And I'd certainly be remiss to not include, like, I've recently got involved in the Super Scratch Foundation. And that's another thing, like try to get people into this business, try to show them that there's a pathway. And even that there's probably as good a pathway out there as anything in any profession, that there's the potential to pay for your college. This is an underserved area, that there's tons of opportunity going forward. And so open those doors for people. And so if you can reach out to me and you're of any interest of getting into this profession, then I'm going to help try to connect you with the right people, the right schools, whatever it may be. So, if you can't find me, you're obviously here through Tyler. You can get Tyler to get me.
Well, appreciate you jumping on today, Connor, and look forward to continuing the relationship. And yes, looking forward to getting back out in the Chicago pretty soon. So
yeah, look forward to having you out here.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Leadership on the Links. For more leadership insights and industry expertise, connect with us at bloomgolfpartners.com or follow us on social media sites LinkedIn and Instagram. If you enjoyed this episode of Leadership on the Links, we'd be thrilled if you'd leave a review or share it with someone who you know would get some value. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to stay updated. Thanks for joining us today.